Drink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. All right, before we get into the stories this week, I want to set the record straight. Drink the Nation is evolving a little. We're moving away from the psychiatrist lecturing the country from a leather chair vibe. What we're doing now is a conversation about what's actually happening in the world and what's happening inside the people watching it. We're putting the psychology back in the headlines. Not punditry, not pundit cosplay, just clinicians trying to understand why America reacts the way it does when it's scared, angry, or lonely. So instead of big theoretical tangents, you'll hear us break down the week's stories through the lens of identity, projection, shame, power, all the stuff that drives the circus under the tent. We're still drinking bourbon. We're still irreverent, but we're talking to each other now, not at you. The country's on the couch again. Let's see if we can keep it there for an hour.
It's going to get billed for an hour regardless of whether it sticks around or not.
All right. Well, I'm David. Got my military service. It's more than most, less than some. I'm here. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm board certified. Believe me, don't, whatever. I don't care. I'm feeling a little special today, so I'm drinking Old Crow 86.
Yep, keep it classy.
And why am I doing that? Because I bought some, and when you buy some, turns out you buy a lot. A lot of it. You buy like a gallon. You can't just buy it. You got to buy a whole plastic jug of this stuff, and there's a ton of it. And we'll see. Keeps you loosey-goosey.
You know, if you had visited your local liquor store, fine establishment that sells adult spirits, you can get pints of that stuff. You didn't have to get a gallon. You did the bougie thing and like ordered it. It came to your house.
I was too embarrassed to go to the store. Maybe I was too lazy to go to the store. I just ordered it online, and my options were to just get two of them. Imagine the person was delivering this to my house. They two giant bottles, one of Old Crow and one of Old Crow 86 of it. They were thinking, wow, this person is going to kill themselves tonight. This person is definitely committing suicide.
Nothing good comes out of 2 gallons of Old Crow.
As this guy handed it to me, he just looked at me. He's like, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry." He's like, "Is there anything I can do? Should I call somebody?"
Yeah, life must be tough.
And as he was handing me my unfolded cardboard box to sleep on later that night, he's like, here's the box they gave me for you.
Right. Came with complimentary matches to start the dumpster fire just to keep yourself warm. Hey, it's Rob, also a board certified psychiatrist, also with 30 years in the military and 25-ish as a psychiatrist. And this evening, I pulled a bottle that would have been located very close to the Old Crow. So in your average liquor store, you're going to find Old Crow situated very closely to Evan Williams, and same price point, actually, both of them, although Evan Williams has a little more prestige, a little more respect among bartenders. They use it quite frequently as their bottom shelf for cocktails, etc. So
something's got to hold up the shelf.
You don't have to be quite as embarrassed if you ask for the Evan Williams as you do when you ask for the Old Crow.
That's true. That is true. But if you're asking for Evan Williams, it just sounds like you're asking for somebody at the bar. You're like, no, I don't know him.
Then that would be a great time for me to pedantically explain to them who Evan Williams was, why he's important to bourbon. I think I've already given that story in one of our episodes. So if one of our tens of listeners would like to hear it again, we could probably find it somewhere in our archives.
There's got to be something. I mean, I'm not a bartender. I've never been a bartender. I've spent probably more time than I should at bars for professional reasons.
Yeah. Learning your skill set.
I imagine that a bartender could not be less excited to hear somebody order by name Evan Williams, but then to have somebody, because it is bottom shelf, but to then have somebody explain to them the importance of Evan Williams. To have you order one of the cheapest bourbons available, but then to do it in a condescending way to then say, well, Evan Williams, that would be just delightful to watch.
On brand for me. It would just be in keeping with the brand.
Is likely to order Evan Williams as Johnny Walker Blue Label or something, right?
Yeah, well, and I'm absolutely convinced in that environment, I probably would have already had 1 or 2 in, and I would probably, also reference him as Sonny and Boyo at some point in the conversation. So,
Yeah.
I mean, just really to add injury to insult.
You definitely wouldn't see him spitting directly into your,
Drink, yeah,
but it wouldn't matter. The ABV is high enough that whatever, it kills off.
it kills it. Yeah,
It just
absolutely.
adds to the flavor. It just helps water it down a little bit. All right. Okay, so as promised, let's get to the Shrink the Nation weekly topics. Let's do this. You ready?
I am.
I'm excited. All right. So, topic one, first pour. We're going shutdown as strategy. Democrats flipped the script on moral politics. So, to give a little context, the Democratic leaders are leaning into the shutdown as leverage on healthcare and equity priorities. They're refusing a short continuing resolution without any concessions after years of blasting the GOP's shutdown tactics that were exactly the same. The role reversal forces a values test. Are these new rules or the same playbook with different jerseys? What do we think?
Yeah, so this one I have to be cautious with because anyone to our tens of listeners who have been loyally listening in, I've certainly alluded to the fact that I am currently not in my normal place in the world. I'm off somewhere else. The shutdown actually has a direct effect on me. It extends where I am for a little longer, or at least until this thing resolves. I'm slightly frustrated by it, so I'm going to keep my transference in check in discussing this. I think back to when I was a kid and I just didn't remember these happening. The first time I really remember it occurring was in the mid 90s. And there's a reason why I don't remember them happening is that prior to 96 under Gingrich, they didn't happen that often. And when they did, it was like 1 day or 2 days. Prior to the late 70s, these didn't exist. That the government just clicked along under the promise that it would be funded. So things didn't shut down. And then in roughly 1980, and this was during, I believe, at the very end of Carter's administration, maybe, right before Reagan took office, or maybe Reagan was in, Attorney General of the U.S. said, no, can't do this. That if the government is not funded, then everything shuts down. And since then, it's become a thing. So since right around 1980, there have been 21 government shutdowns, including this one. It just is that through the 80s up until 96, they were very brief. They were 1 or 2 day events looked at as like a big deal that were not funded. And then in the mid 90s, something changed, and we can argue that in a moment, and they started becoming longer. And then the longest one on record was 35 days, and that was back in 2019. So I'm hoping for something on the other end of that spectrum. We shall see.
What's the difference now at this point when we're looking at what happens with these shutdowns? Really not picking sides, but it is interesting because this is definitely a different perspective, at least how the Democrats are taking it.
That's kind of what's different. So if we go back into the 80s, these were actually mostly shared events. It wasn't necessarily GOP led or Democrat led. It was a different time, and there was more cross reactivity, cross engagement across the aisles. So most, like 9 through that period, were shared. They really didn't have ownership. Since 1996, they have been almost universally GOP led. And since 1996, the Democrats have consistently moralized keeping the government open. They have said that it's a moral imperative, that it's the right thing to do, and have heaped blame upon the GOP for initiating these shutdowns. And then we fast forward to the now, and it's changed all of a sudden. So what used to be a moral imperative is now the right thing to do. I am interested I'm always interested in moral relativism and how you can look at yourself in the mirror when your value set changes. But the psychodynamics of it at this moment is interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting from so many different angles. Maybe just compare between the 90s and like the 2000s, the psychology difference between the leaders in the 1990s, Clinton and Gingrich. We're still kind of operating under these deal maker incentives. Negotiation was considered evidence of competence. There was a lot of status anxiety. Will I look weak if I budge. And then in the 2000s, when you had Obama versus the Tea Party, Trump versus Congress, there was a lot more performance incentives. So will my base punish me if I don't escalate? And that status anxiety flipped to, will I look disloyal if I compromise? So I think that's definitely an interesting change. But what really drives that shift?
I don't know. I don't know, and that's the part that I find frustrating. What I can say is that something definitely changed in the mid '90s. There was this shift from a general sense that it was their job to work together and their job as politicians to compromise. Now, I'm going to argue that at that particular juncture, prior to the mid '90s, we had a majority of our politicians were World War II vets, and a majority of them had fought together. They had participated together in this great war, and they, I think, held each other in higher esteem, and also had proven to one another that they were patriots, that they had the best interest of the United States at heart, even if they approached it differently. And then by the '90s, we saw baby boomers predominating, and that changed things. It changed the psychology of it. It's the first time under Clinton, the first time that the amount of partisanship started to sort of outpace cooperation, and purity tests became a thing. And at that time, it was family values.
Yeah, shame and face saving still worked in 95, 96. Those fights were budget disputes, ideological stakes, one-side budget, Medicare, and shutdowns were still taboo. Both sides still wanted to govern and win, but shame was still present. Now, shutdowns are it's brand expression. There's that proof of loyalty to a cause. It was defund the ACA, it was build the wall. Now it's the big, beautiful bill. The shutdown is the message. Shame has completely lost its leverage. There's nothing. Nobody gives a shit. And so this purity test is completely taken over. And that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But what is, I think, more interesting is that where the purity tests have in the 2000s, the last 25 years, have really been utilized so heavily by the Republican Party. Now the Democratic Party is trying to grab onto it. It seems like now it's, I think, under the guise of righteousness, but it's, hey, we are going to keep the government shut down until we get what we want. It's a completely different dynamic.
Most times there was a sense of a responsibility that this is the job of Congress. It's they control the purse strings. Their job is to pass a budget. When's the last time we had anything other than a continuing resolution? When's the last time we actually passed a budget? Can you? I don't know. I don't recall. I don't remember a budget being passed. We've done these continuing resolutions over and over and over again during periods in which we're ramping up into an election cycle. They tend to work together to pass these resolutions. They kick the can down the line. In periods between election cycles, there's more of a incentive, and it reminds me very much of psychological concept of acting out. That this tends to be the party that is not in power. It tends to be an expression of power, but it's the equivalent of a child getting angry, a powerless child. They're children. They have no control over their parents, but they get angry and break their toy. Is it useful? Does it help? Does it actually accomplish anything? Probably not, but it does express powerlessness. And that's what's happening. Now, of course, it's being swathed in this moral choice that they're doing it for the ACA tax incentives related to deductibles, which is a fine cause, but it does not. It seems to me that there's other ways to fight that fight in Congress if they're doing their job, not when it comes to the budget and shutting it down. The one that happened in 2019 supposedly cost us about $24 billion to the GDP. So these are expensive. They're something that maybe the average person who's not steeped in the military may not know this, but active duty military members do not get paid during this, which is a incredible burden to particularly our young soldiers who aren't getting paid that much to begin with. Our civilians get furloughed. It has an incredible impact on our readiness, our ability to fight and win this nation's wars, which is the core mission of the Army. The reserves are completely sidelined and unable to do anything, and they're already on a tight schedule with their limited time to get together. So the downstream effects to the military are frightening to me. If I were, the perfect enemy of the United States, I would let this drag out for a few weeks, let the military increasingly become disarrayed because of not having our critical civilians around, having to worry more about how we're going to get our 19-year-old kids' families enough money to cover the bills and have food. And then I might think, this would be a good time to attack Estonia and invade Taiwan and North Korea to stream down over the 38th parallel. I find it anxiety provoking on many levels. And that's just one element. I mean, when you step back from it and think about how this impacts the average American, I mean, tax season's not quite there yet, but every aspect of federal government life right now is in a hold status. So it is impactful. It just is, it's a downstream impact that I don't think people are entirely aware of. And what we end up now is shutdowns function as collective acting out and identity maintenance rituals. No, they're not policy tools. I don't think there has been a single example of a shutdown leading to a significant policy change. This is the child standing in the middle of the room screaming because they didn't get ice cream.
Well, thank you for calming everybody's nerves on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, to simplify it down to quick, what we had in the 90s, we disagree, let's deal. In 2000s, we perform, you clap. That's what we have. We have a switch. It is different, it is interesting. We'll see what happens. Everyone else says, please pay the people who keep the lights on, and we'll see how long this takes.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on. We'll watch it. All right, we got to move on to the next topic. So this next one's the fight Trump coin. Currency cult in comedy. So there is, if you haven't heard, a proposed commemorative $1 coin with President Trump's image and the rally mantra, fight, fight, fight. It wouldn't be legal tender, but it is legal theater. Fans call it patriotic merch. Critics are calling it cult cosplay. This one's interesting for a lot of reasons. Let's talk psychologically. What is going on here?
Well, the Romans were good at this.
Mm-hmm.
Romans of any stature would have coinage made with their face on it. And it ends up conveying something to the masses, I suppose, is when you're walking around with someone's face in your pocket, they start to take on almost a mythic quality. And historically, we have a tradition in the United States in which, and I believe this was started by George Washington, and everyone else just obeyed that norm moving forward, that no living individual ends up on our coinage. So this is a bit of a deviation from our norms, and it does smack of sort of old Roman techniques to win over the masses.
Yeah, first of all, it's a commemorative coin, right? It's non-circulating. It's completely symbolic. It's a perfect medium for America's emotional baggage, right? Like, this is a transitional object.
It is.
It is perfect for that.
It's a teddy bear.
But commemorative coins are kind of how we say, we can't fix anything, but look, shiny.
Yeah.
That's what a commemorative coin is. Its value is only to the person that holds it. It's not a quarter. It's not a silver dollar. Like, you can't go buy stuff with it. But you can rub the coin and you can whisper, "Daddy, daddy, government still strong," you know? So in Rome, they would make these in Rome, but it was a PR release. Like, they weren't tender there either. It was, you know, because you would even think, well, if the Romans were doing it, they weren't printing their own faces on coins to be used. They were doing it as a PR release. It was just like, hey, we got a new emperor. It was Nero's version of a selfie that he was then giving to everyone to say, still divine, still fabulous. Look, I'm looking great, right before the whole fucking city burned to the ground. Nations that do this historically do it right before things go off the rails. Napoleon put himself on coins and calendars.
Saddam. I've got some.
Kim Il-sung did this.
Surprise.
Actually did it on coins. He was on every coin, bill, and school child's homework.
Oh man, that is one hell of an ego.
So by the late 70s, private mints had issued Elvis coins, which proves that Americans will accept any authoritarian so long as He swivels his hips. Thank you very much.
Well, the transitional object is what it jumps out at me as. It's this sort of magical thinking that I can hold this thing in my hand and participate in power, that it makes me a part of a participant, that I can pass these down to my grandchildren or great grandchildren, and they're going to hold some sort of value. And ultimately, it's myth making. And when you are on a coin, you become a mythic figure. So yes, it has no real value. People are going to pay for it. I wonder where the proceeds of that go to. So, the Romans would, that's a Roman equivalent of a selfie. And now we're going to sell them on Truth Social or however they're going to be sold. And they fundamentally have no value.
They're being minted by the U.S. Mint. I would point out, it doesn't seem like President Trump is asking for it from what I can tell. It doesn't seem as though he is saying, I want this. It sounds like somebody else has suggested this and they're doing it. It is odd. It is different than historical. Like, it's different.
That the U.S. Mint is doing it makes it different because there have been commemorative coins forever. They, you
Right.
stay up late enough.
Yes.
When I was a kid,
Yeah.
on TBS at
Right.
3:00 in the morning, there were these commemorative coin
Yeah.
infomercials.
I want to be fair in discussing it and saying it is odd because the U.S. Mint, like in the 1970s, there were privately minted tokens that literally read, I am not a crook, that were issued. There were anti-Nixon coins that were issued before he resigned. But that wasn't done through the U.S. Mint. And so the odd thing here is that it is done through the U.S. Mint. So there is an official channel that is planning to put a non-valuable commemorative coin out there with a living person on it who happens to be the currently sitting president, though it does not, from what any of us have intel on, seem to be the brainchild of said president. Like, I don't want to now, unless that comes out to say he specifically asked for it, I'm not going to say he did. Like, it doesn't, that, because that's not fair. Whereas Nero certainly did. Like, Nero, Kim Il Sung,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Saddam Hussein, like, they definitely did say, put my face on everything. President Trump, by all accounts at this point, did not say, make a coin with my face on it and circulate it and make it worth nothing. Like, we haven't seen that right now. The fact that the U.S. Mint is doing it is still incredibly odd. And that is strange. The fact that there is a lot of psychological factors that go into having a transitional object, having a coin, you can already see this is something that will piss off the left to no end. It will thrill people on the right in very odd ways to no end. This is just a divisive thing. And God forbid that he die as they're printing them, because, that's always a possibility. Then they'll be like, oh my God, some stroke of whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's the interesting, and this is certainly very human, the need for souvenirs. Souvenirs are the funniest thing in my mind, that there's this drive to have souvenirs, to get that T-shirt that says, I don't know, Daytona Beach or whatever, Myrtle Beach, insert place that people go to. But, you get a hand-painted shell that says Daytona Beach 2006. Like, anyone keeps that stuff. Like, it just becomes junk, but we're still driven to do it. And there's entire industries that feed into that. And the other thing that I guess I just have a persisting fascination about, and I'm going to call it the Liberace factor. Do you remember Liberace? Do you know who that is?
I'm aware. I know that your grandma would fight me if I were to say anything bad about Liberace, including
She would.
that he were gay.
Oh my gosh. I have to admit, I've not done the legwork on this. I can only speak from my Appalachian cultural background. But within Appalachia, and I think this is probably bigger than Appalachia because he was a very popular individual, there is this interesting fascination with ostentatious wealth. So glittery things, golden things, gold leaf, lots of jewels. Liberace existed at a time in which it was just not okay to be gay. He was, and history has played this out, he was, he never admitted it. In fact, I think he denied it over and over and over again because it was a recurring question. But he was much, much beloved despite. And I keep thinking, I see this shiny coin and I keep thinking the Liberace factor. that people like shiny things and they're drawn to this. So I can't fully put my finger on it, but it does feel like souvenir, transitional object kind of thing. But here we sit with a non-legal tender fight coin coming to a neighbor near you very soon.
There you go. Well, something to look at.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
All right, for our last topic, we have a party of one. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene's revolt and the psychology of scapegoats. With the federal government shut down since October 1st, 2025, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has publicly trained fire on GOP leadership, not Trump, using mainstream media, i.e. CNN, to blame her own party's leadership and urge action, intensifying intra-tribal pressure as the Senate stalemate drags on. So lots of interesting psychological things here. We've got triangulation and cutoff. Got some loyalty tests, narcissistic injury. So let's talk.
You know, what I love about this is I felt the collective pucker factor of the United States change when she did this. I mean, I felt it personally. When I read this for the first time, I immediately in my belly started to reevaluate my sense of her. The cognitive dissonance of what I've always believed she stood for, and then coming out in this way, and it struck me as interesting. And then it made me think, gosh, if I'm having that, and I don't really honestly have that firmly held beliefs or ideas or opinions about Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know what this incident flies radically in the face of everything I've ever thought I'd known about her. And all of a sudden, I had to reevaluate. So it's been funny, and I've actually searched this out because I really wanted to get a bead on what's going on. She was berated by Trump on the floor of the House. You know, he was angry, screamed at her, "Don't ever do this." Senator Tillis, another Republican, has now said, whereas most of the time she has been a darling of the MAGA movement, she's been a darling of the far end of the GOP, that she's bringing the brand down now. And then The View, which is, I think they pay homage to a more conservative view. They've got at least one member who's somewhat conservative, but in general, I think it's pretty obvious that they tend to be a left-leaning, if not fully left. But they referenced her as the voice of reason. So when Whoopi Goldberg is calling Marjorie Taylor Greene the voice of reason, you know, it's like the movie Ghostbusters. It's cats and dogs living together in the streets. I'm looking for the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man to come walking down the street. I'm already considering the need to cross the streams. You know, don't ever do that except when you need to do that. So it's interesting.
I would say it's surprising, but I don't know. There's so much performance that's going on. Nothing she does surprises me at this point because I don't expect anybody to do anything. I try not to predict what anybody is going to do. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like maybe the anxiety is getting, because I think obviously both sides don't like Shutdown. They both don't like it because it's bad for both parties. It's about how they're framing it. It's not surprising, I think, that somebody cracked.
What I'm struck by is that we're in a post-policy universe. There was a time when politicians had policies that they were firmly behind, that this was their belief structure. This is what I believe. Sometimes they had to do some gymnastics to twist an issue into their belief structure, but they still had this sort of core belief structure that you could, with some certainty, predict what they were going to do or say. And we're at a point now where we are so far post policy that, the history, like in the last several elections, the Republican Party has not even selected their planks. They don't do that anymore. Whereas historically, that was a big part of the conventions where they would select, these are the topics, these are the issues, these are the policies that we stand behind and what we're for. And of course, by the time they get to the conventions, they were trying to globalize them so they appealed to the largest population. They've stopped doing that we no longer are policy-driven political system. And, I swear that if we were to somehow magically bring Ronald Reagan and the Reaganites of the mid-'80s forward, they would not recognize the party that is identified as Republican now. And it might actually be, I think it's probably similar for, go back to the 80s and bring Democrats forward, because there used to be this huge swath of conservative Democrats that were very conservative in terms of, they were conservative around defense, maybe around social issues, but they were great believers in unions and workers' rights. And they were blue dog Democrats that existed. And if we were to pull a good number of those Democrats forward, I don't think they'd recognize the Democratic Party of today. And I think if we were to just poll 100 people, and for our tens of listeners, please go to our website and send me in. Tell me if I'm false here. I think most people would have a hard time articulating either side, whatever party they identify with. I think they'd have a hard time articulating what their party is for. They would probably have a single issue that they feel is important, whether it be like pro-life or, right to choice or whatever. There's immigration, whatever the topic is, but they could identify that one thing, but I don't think they could lay out the 10 things that their party's for. So in a post-policy world, you get this kind of crazy flipping of this, like, whatever my opinion is. And I get the sense she went to something and talked to her constituents, which is exactly what her job is. She's doing her job. Her constituents said, this sucks. We don't want to pay higher premiums. And she's like, God damn, you're right. This sucks. And she's come out, which has caused a lot of dissonance.
What's interesting is not so much, it's not that piece. It's not that she's doing her job, because they should all be doing their job. It's more of the fact that she's doing her job, but still some levelization, some transference, some idealization split that exists there. And I think that's what's interesting, because while she comes out and attacks the party for the shutdown, she's still protecting Trump as not playing a role in it. And that's that the father leader is untouchable. He holds that fantasy of protection, but the manager leader, Mike Johnson, he holds the guilt. And so she's doing her job by blaming somebody for the shutdown, but she's not. It's just psychologically cheaper to swap out that lower level manager for her than to surrender the full fantasy of the higher power in her mind. I think that's what's interesting about this, is that piece.
Yeah.
Psychologically, well, I think if that makes sense.
No, it does entirely. And it also paints a picture from last episode, a low differentiated family. So if they were high differentiated, the party could tolerate one of their members dissenting. Good example of this is the single Democrat who voted in favor of the continuing resolution has already been told that they're going to face a primary challenge. And I forget who it is.
Fetterman?
Was it Fetterman?
Senator wise, yeah. Okay. Well, there were three.
Well, they've already, because they failed their purity test. So both sides are absolutely demonstrating that they are a low differentiation family. They cannot tolerate the identity of any one of their members at all. You are with us or you're against us. And that's a dangerous place to be. And it also has some downstream consequences from an organizational standpoint, because say the GOP outmaneuvers, takes full control of everything. If you play this out, they're not a monolith. They really aren't as unified as it feels. And that's part of my argument against this government shutdown. When you put up a fight, you give the other side the reason to unify. And sometimes not fighting is your best option, because then the monolith actually dissolves. It's not a monolith. It's a bunch of people all with their own agendas. None of them really are following any kind of set of policies that everyone has agreed on. And you see these cracks. And this is one of those cracks, that the GOP is not as monolithic as one might want to believe.
Yeah. If we're throwing back to our last talk with Bowen, family systems theory to the triangulation, this one screams it. You have the one person who takes issue with their party using the media to call it out, triangulate with the people rather than just having the anxious conversation with somebody else. The triangulation, again, is where two people have the anxiety, and rather than dealing with it themselves, so having the conversation, they pull in a third party, i.e. CNN, to have that more public discourse and to try to deal with those things. So very much triangulation here in this respect, but it's all very fascinating. Unfortunately, it'll give us probably lots to talk about in this episode and future ones.
A throwback again. This all feels incredibly nihilistic to me. When these are the kinds of things that happen when things don't matter. As it turns out, at least in my opinion, again, as a guy who's actually being directly affected by it and being with a group of individuals who are absolutely directly affected by it and who are in the midst of angsting about how they're going to, pay their bills come another few days when no check comes, and most of them are living check to check. This actually counts. And you can only allow these things when somehow you've convinced yourself it doesn't matter anymore. These just don't matter. And they do. They have consequences. And as we have moved through from the 80s when these first began, to the 90s when they started to escalate and started to lengthen, to today, and the last one being 35 days, this one's setting at 14 days and counting, they've become normalized. The responsibility to prevent the suffering or end the suffering no longer exists. And it all feels very nihilistic to me.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's listened to us more than one or two episodes could probably take any of the psychological principles that we've spoken about over time and applied a lot of it to everything, hopefully, they're seeing in their lives, which is really, I think, helpful in any of these situations, is to look at what you're seeing, naming it, understanding what you're seeing. It really does help to sort of break its spell. This is what's going on. Put some agency back into your life. Understand that purity tests don't fill paychecks. This is scapegoating. This is what we're seeing. We're just seeing somebody blaming somebody. When you start to feel rage at leadership, when you start to feel these emotions, ask yourself who's really being protected in those situations. What's really trying to be accomplished here? Try to get that bigger picture. And if you don't have a good frame of reference, which I think a lot of us don't, especially if you're living in those echo chambers that we're all creating within our social media environments, expand how you're getting your information and try to get multiple viewpoints. You can see these things a little bit more clearly and understand them as the more performative practices that they are, and understand what's going on so that you can step back from it. How that's going to help you, hopefully with time, it will help you make different or better decisions in who you're voting for, how you're interacting with your fellow man, woman, neighbors, so that you can just have better conversations and you can maybe give a little bit more grace and communicate more clearly.
Yeah.
All right. Prescription time.
Oh boy.
So I feel the frustration that any psychiatrist does, which is we'll try to give you the best possible prescription we can. And it's usually pretty simple stuff. Take your medications on time, diet, exercise, sleep hygiene, take care of yourself. Don't overreact to situations. Think about others. Just do those things. But when patients come back at you and they go, okay, but I don't want to do any of those things. What else you got? We don't got much else, right? Like we're like, no, take your medications and you'll stop trying to hop the fence into the ostrich farm next door with a knife when you're manic, and you won't end up in the hospital for 3 weeks at a time. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to do that. So just like this, we give really similar prescriptions. Get out there and health locally and try to stay away from social media. It gets a little boring. So we want to try to spice things up, try to give you auxiliary prescriptions.
More challenges than you might think. It makes me think about my clinical life. And yeah, I end up probably telling the same handful of things to everyone I see over and over and over again. But I suppose me repeating it week after week after week here would get really boring for our tens of listeners. So my prescription for this week is a 15-point stretching routine that you must engage in before you move the goalpost. I believe there's a lot of Democrats out there who probably have pulled a groin. They've ripped a hammy because I don't think they prepared fully for the activity of moving the moral certainty goalposts.
The shift from we can't ever close the government to shut that shit down. It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think it's fascinating to see because I think it really confused the GOP too, because nobody was fully prepared to not have the Democrats completely roll over on this one. I think they figured didn't have a counterpoint. They didn't have anything.
Right. Well, so my second prescription is that they have to emulate the Army. So we don't train to time, we train to standard. For them, that means they got to do their job. And it's not about time, it's about getting their job done. So if they don't get their job done, they don't get to leave the chamber. And I mean that to include they don't get to go to the restroom. They don't get to go to their dining facility. They have to stay in the chamber until they have done their job, which means passing bills, getting budgets through. They have to. And the longer they're there, the more they get shut down. They can't order out for pizza. There's no Uber Eats. It is, you are sitting in that chair until we get this shit done.
If you just shut the chamber and just took away their cell phones and said, you guys have to come up with something, I think they all might die. I don't know that if you didn't give them staff, lobbyists, special interest groups, all the people who actually wrote this stuff and told them what to vote on weren't available to them, I don't think they could do it. I don't think the vast majority of Congress or the Senate could actually do this. I mean, across the board. I think if you told them to come up with something, they'd be completely lost. Most of them have no idea what's in the bills that they're presenting. They don't actually read them.
They're very long.
They're thousands of pages. Yeah, they didn't read them.
That might be the nice thing about like a chat GPT thing is that they can now at least feed them into an AI and the AI can give them a bulleted, 5 bullets. Those are the big things.
Kind of, yeah. But it doesn't do all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, this is the other prescription. This is completely absurd. But as far as I'm concerned, if a member of Congress fails or allows the government to shut down, that should render them ineligible to run again. They have failed in their core mission, their job as laid out by the Constitution of the United States. They failed, so they have rendered themselves ineligible to continue to serve.
You would think that would be enough for the people to just stop fucking voting for these people. I mean, just across the board, they would say, like, your only job is to keep things going. But hey, okay, well, so my prescription is simple. I think the Congress should put forth the Patriots Emotional Support Animal Act. Really simple. Everyone gets to adopt a therapy bald eagle. If that's logistically difficult, then we'll just staple googly eyes to a rotisserie chicken, and then we can just tell it our political views. And then it'll just be the most validating conversation that we've had all week. That'll be nice, right?
I think I know this answer. You've not watched the series Peacemaker, have you? So he has a pet eagle named Eagly, and one of the characters in this season has what they call bird blindness. He cannot identify what type of bird, so he references them all as ducks. Anyway, that's ancillary really funny, to your point, but
would that be a problem? I just don't know if that would be an issue.
Well, because he failed to warn his team that an eagle was swooping down to kill them, to do harm to them, and he blamed it on bird blindness, that he has no ability to differentiate what type of bird that he's looking at.
Well, he would get a emotional therapy.
You just have to assure him this is indeed an eagle because he couldn't see it.
All right. And then another one. So how about a national timeout plan? Since Washington can't keep the lights on, everyone in Congress gets a juice box, a mat, and a 20-minute nap until they can use I feel statements without yelling. And then America doesn't reopen until someone sincerely apologizes.
That's right back to preschool days.
I think that's where we're at with Congress.
We're not in a high functioning family. No.
No, I think that's what we need to do. All right. So how about this one? So to build empathy, I think every elected official must spend the shutdown living like a furloughed worker. So no staff, no paycheck, and all calls routed to their mom. At the end, they earn a gold star and a mild panic attack.
I would like to, legitimately see them have to like stand up in the center of chamber and say, I might be wrong. And
That's a goofy one.
yeah, I might be wrong and mean it. And you know what? I know what they would feel. They would feel this incredible lightness, which is their nervous system recognizing adulthood. If they just could do that. But it's not.
No. If I'm impressed by anything with Congress, it's the capacity for the lack of shame. It's impressive. I can tell you to watch people and I think collectively it's to watch so many people be able to stand there and say so much that they don't mean or believe or think or feel so readily, easily. I mean, on camera. Because they all know they have cameras on them all the time. I think it would be really difficult, I think, to go through your day constantly. But I imagine over time it must get easier. It's got to get easier, right? I would be miserable. I would be a miserable failure in that. I don't know how long I would last. I would be dropping F-bombs. I would be speaking my mind. I'd be saying, I would just be like, nah, fuck you, fuck that. And I would be on the news every night in just bad ways. I would imagine I would be torched by all sides. They'd be like, how did this clown get there? And the answer is I wouldn't get there because they would, no way would they allow this hot mess. But
yeah, I would just love to see collective commitment to doing the job. Doing the job is part of their integrity and their identity is just getting the job done. And it would make a huge difference, but it's not at all how it feels at this particular juncture.
No, I think you're talking about a different era. I mean, at this point, this isn't what we used to think we would see. But this isn't. This is saving face. And it's saving face for the party. This isn't saving face for oneself.
Purity testing and
that's all it is.
Absolutely.
It's purity testing. Yeah, that's the best. Yeah, this is just purity testing. Can I toe the party line? That's it. But all right, well, thank you for everyone who stuck around. Hopefully you enjoy the new format. Go to our website, shrinkthenation.com. Shout outs on socials, smash that subscribe, hit like, whatever. We have our weekly newsletter. Sign up for that. Give us some feedback. Let us know if you like this. We're going to try to tighten this up, try to get it to be more conversational, make it, I think, a little bit more interesting, hopefully a little bit more on topic for the week. We will enjoy making it. Hopefully you'll enjoy listening to it. So that's it. Anything else, Rob?
I have nothing. Honor and duty, people. That's all I have.
All right. Cue up that music, and we are out.